Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Combating High Moisture Conditions with MAPEI Patches. We have some brief housekeeping before we start. Your phones are on mute. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box in the corner of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end of today's session, time permitting, or via an email after. And you can always send questions to mapeidigital@mapei.com. Now, without further delays, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Jeff Johnson. Jeff is the business manager for MAPEI's floor covering and installation systems line. He brings to the industry more than 30 years' experience in the development and marketing of floor covering installation products. His practical experience in the construction industry and as a bench chemist give Jeff an insightful perspective on surface preparation, moisture mitigation, and floor covering installation. And with that, Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jen, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule and day to spend some time with us and talking about high moisture conditions and MAPEI patches. First of all, let me just make sure we're clear on the scope of this project, that we're not talking about patching materials to go on your raincoats to deal with a rainstorm. We're going to be talking a little bit about patching compounds as used in the floor covering installation world. So certainly this is a great opportunity for you to learn about some of our product solutions for that, but it's also a great opportunity to ask some questions. So I do encourage you to take advantage of the chat window on the side there. If I catch the question, I might try to answer it during the process, but Jen, I think we'll certainly get back to those questions at the end of the presentation. We'll make sure you get as good an answer as I can come up with for that. In the meantime, also, I do want to remind you that there's a lot of great information on our website at www.mapei.com. A lot of this information I'll be sharing with you today is available on our technical bulletin, technical data sheets, brochures, and other documentation that we have on the website. Okay. So having said all that, what are we talking about? And sorry for this picture, but that is the scope of what we're going to be talking about: patching concrete, patching or skim coating concrete, one of the most common substrates for us in the FCIS business. We do an awful lot of work in commercial environments and some even residential, where our starting point is a concrete slab. And this picture that you're seeing in front of the screen is probably pretty typical of what you would see on a normal day job, with footprints and taco sauce and all this other kind of garbage that's on that slab that you'll somehow or other need to put some kind of a flooring material on top of it. So at some point, that slab can be your best friend. It can be perfect condition, pristine, fresh, porous, and all that kind of stuff. Or it can be your worst nightmare. It can be all kinds of contaminants and other different kinds of conditions that'll make your life miserable. So the difference between that good dog, bad dog thing, I apologize for the imagery, but it seems to make sense to me, that a concrete slab that in some cases, in some respects in the industry, is very hard to find, is a concrete slab built according to ASTM F710. And if you don't have a copy of that ASTM on file, I would encourage you to go get it, because that is the guidelines for concrete construction for resilient flooring, which we do an awful lot of business in, and gives you a lot of great information in there about underslab moisture barriers, compression strengths, dryness and flatness, and all that kind of stuff. So theoretically, new construction these days is supposed to be made according to the ASTM F710, or another standard that's called the American Concrete Institute ACI 302-2-6. Both of those are great documents to have on file that tell you for basically how the concrete slab is supposed to be poured. And when we get into it, when we're talking about high moisture conditions, a concrete slab that is your best friend is not high moisture. It's a less than 3 pounds of moisture vapor emission rate per the ASTM F1869 test, or an RH level of less than 75% using the ASTM F2170. Again, these are almost, I should use a unicorn for this kind of a picture. They're very hard to find, and what most of us deal with these days are the concrete slabs of unknown origin. They're a menace. You can almost hear that Jaws theme in the background when you walk on the job site. What are you going to get into when you take a look at the concrete slab? You don't know how it was made. You don't know how old it was. When you do some moisture testing, you're pegging the charts off the moisture vapor emission rates, and your RH levels are 99%. So the course of this presentation, we're going to be spending most of our time talking about the danger zones, or those concrete slabs that are higher moisture content. A little bit of refrains or preaching or choruses to the choir. There are 2 test methods that we use for determining moisture content of a concrete slab. You cannot essentially tell by a visual examination whether or not a concrete is dry or wet by looking at it. So there are 2 test methods that we in the industry endorse and support that give some idea of what kind of condition that slab is in terms of moisture that's left in the slab. The ASTM F1869 is perhaps the older, more traditional method for determining moisture vapor emission rates. This is what we call the calcium chloride test. This is the little Petri dish of calcium chloride that we put underneath a dome, plastic dome, and you let it sit there for 3 days on top of a concrete slab, come back and record the measurements. And that gives you a number that says at what rate the water is evaporating out of that slab over 1,000 square foot area over a 24-hour period. So this really is giving you rate of evaporation information. Now, the important thing to note about that, in my opinion, is that once you cover it with an impervious floor covering, whether it's even carpet tile or sheet vinyl or rubber or so on and so forth, you crimp down the valve on that evaporation rate. So the rate basically goes to 0, and whatever moisture was in there is probably going to still stay there. Yes, you'll get some migration of moisture vapor around seams and cracks or gaps in the flooring installation, but for the most part, you shut the valve on the evaporation rate and you're left with whatever's left in the slab. And that's kind of what the ASTM F2170 really does. And that basically gives you the state of the humidity, not a rate per se, but it's the state. What is the condition of the moisture level in that concrete slab? And there's a lot of great presentations, a lot of information about both of these tests. I would encourage all of you to study up on these test methods as well. But they give you a better indication of what that slab is going to be like in terms of its humidity condition once you do cover it. Now, again, all of these test methods are recommended for use on concrete slabs poured according to the ASTM F710, which means you're supposed to have an underslab moisture barrier into the concrete. You're supposed to do it when the HVA systems are running and the temperature is supposed to be 72 degrees Fahrenheit and so on. So again, what the 2170 will tell you, if you get high numbers on that, again, which we are focusing here on high moisture content, you can get 99s or 90% and above, can indicate that you have a green slab. That means it's relatively young, 5 days, 7 days old. Concrete is a high number. Sometimes you can see the presence of cure and seal compounds on the top of that concrete. Concrete, when it's placed, typically gets some sort of a cure and seal material on the surface to retard the amount of moisture coming off of it. The reason why they do that is to prevent or try to control that concrete slab from curling. So they lock the moisture in to try to keep that moisture in there to stabilize the concrete slab. Now, the reason why is high polished surfaces. I've seen, I'm sure many of you have seen concrete slabs that are almost black and glossy, polished with a motorized polishing equipment just to get a nice smooth surface. That's going to block up all the capillaries, allowing for, that would normally allow for moisture vapor emission to leave. That's going to keep it in the concrete slab and keep the RH high. Fly ash does the same thing. It kind of blocks all the capillaries and keeps it from, keeps the moisture from moving out of the slab as well. Perforations in the underslab moisture barrier are often a nightmare to these flooring manufacturers. The guys placing the concrete decide to use their shovels and poke a few holes in that underslab moisture barrier to allow the concrete to cure faster. And of course, topical water, floods, rainstorms, and so on. Low numbers can indicate an aged concrete and maybe a highly porous slab. Lightweight concrete oftentimes breathes much easier. Again, in my opinion, these RH numbers are more relative. Is because that's what we're going to deal with. That's the condition we're going to deal with once we cover that slab with a flooring material. Again, this is more relative for impervious flooring, resilient flooring, perhaps not as terribly relative for a porous flooring like an action back carpet. But since we're dealing kind of with this resilient flooring market these days is a high level of interest, that's kind of important to us. So what does this all matter? I mean, I don't know how many of you, like myself, have attended an awful lot of moisture in concrete seminars and symposiums, and people make a good living talking about moisture vapor transmission, presence of moisture in concrete slab, and how it affects floor covering installation. Well, what it affects it is because we have to install on it. We have to put things on it in order to finish the job. I assume that wherever you are looking at this webinar, you're in a building, hopefully, on a floor, and underneath that floor is some sort of a construct that supports that flooring material. So what we need to take a look at is this perfect sandwich of all the elements that go together to make that work. So you've got a concrete slab, and I apologize if I'm talking about sandwiches for those of you who are in lunch period mode. I'm getting hungry myself just looking at this old diagram, so it tells you what kind of hunger I'm at. Anyway, it starts with a concrete slab, which is layer one, followed by subfloor preparation materials and adhesive products, a flooring material, maintenance material, and then your stuff, your office chairs, your furniture, your carpet rugs, and so on and so forth. That's the perfect sandwich. You know, all those things need to work together in order to make the perfect Dagwood sub sandwich that we all enjoy. And when certain things change, then life doesn't work as well as you'd like to. So what's happening in the marketplace today is things are changing. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about glue. And I know you didn't sign up to hear about glue, but I need you to learn a little bit about glue, because just like that perfect sandwich, and I'll use a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a perfect sandwich consists of the subfloor prep, the adhesive, and the flooring itself. And what we're focusing on is the peanut butter and jelly here, the peanut butter being the adhesive, the jelly being the subfloor prep. So bear with me with my food analogies, and we'll just talk about that. But what's happening is that our peanut butter is becoming a more higher performance, higher moisture resistant products available today. And we'll talk a little bit about one of those in the next slide. But we're seeing now adhesives being recommended for use on concrete slabs that are up to 99% RH. They're high moisture resistance with up to 12 to 15 pounds of moisture vapor emission rates. They got great pH readings. Now, how they work, just so that I've got an audience here, is that when you apply a PSA adhesive to a concrete slab, whether it's dry or damp, they're eventually going to evaporate, coalesce, and get down to a pure film of adhesive stickiness that is not going to re-emulsify under normal conditions when you cover it with a floor covering, even if the slab is 99% moisture vapor emission. These adhesives are designed to withstand that kind of level. But it's still, you need to understand that concrete slab. You need to do your moisture testing to make sure that everything is in line with what's going to be installed over top of it. An example of that new product that we just introduced here recently is Ultrabond Eco 399. It's a heavy duty pressure sensitive multi-flooring adhesive. And again, this one is designed to work on concrete slabs up to 15 pounds and 99% moisture. And a great product. This one is also, since I've got an audience, I'll tell a little bit about this. Great grab. I think 6 hours worth of working time, which is perfect for the installation of all kind of resilient sheet flooring, including and importantly LVT, luxury vinyl tile and plank. It's heavy rolling load resistant, aggressive grab, and one of the most important things is that it manages or helps to control the gapping, which is a known issue with a lot of LVT. I'm not telling you that you can install LVT in an unacclimated environment and think that the adhesive is going to solve all your problems. You still need to follow all the rules. LVT and resilient flooring should be installed in the environment and the ambient temperature conditions in which the building is going to be maintained. Ideally, you should be installing flooring at 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and not bringing it in from the cold and installing it all nice and tight and then turning the heaters on. That's not going to be a good solution for any kind of flooring. So 399 is going to help you control some of the gapping that might occur with normal shrinkage of LVT. We also have other reactive adhesives that are being introduced now that are not only high moisture resistant, but they provide a moisture barrier as well. We've been doing this for many years now with products like our wood adhesive line, Ultrabond Eco 995 and Ultrabond Eco 985, which work at maximum moisture levels of 25 pounds of moisture vapor emission rate and 100% RH, and create a moisture barrier in the process, protecting the wood floor and the moisture sensitive flooring that might be installed upon on the top of it. A new adhesive that we just introduced in that domain for resilient flooring is Ultrabond Eco MS for LVT. Again, our professional hybrid polymer adhesive for resilient flooring. This one is part of our shower system for LVT, but also a phenomenal adhesive for LVT and resilient flooring on high moisture concrete slabs. And this does not require a moisture vapor barrier. It does work extremely well for those kinds of things. Again, it's a wet lay situation rather than a pressure sensitive like 399, but it is a great product, heavy rolling load, high performance product for LVT and resilient flooring installations going forward. And lastly, again, we're introducing tape systems. If you're not familiar with this, I'd certainly suggest you get with a MAPEI representative about it or give me a call. We'll talk more about it. But we have tape systems, which are fully moisture loaded products, 25 pounds, 100% RH products, provide a moisture barrier in the process, instant installation, and so on and so forth. So again, the industry, the reason why I'm bringing it all up to you is that the industry is moving towards adhesive systems, part of that sandwich, that are now fully moisture resistant. 25 pound, 100% is pretty much the mark of what everything is going. So a lot of numbers floating around in the marketplace about different levels of moisture vapor emission rate. So how do we generate those, or how do we substantiate or make our claims, MAPEI wise, as to whether or not an adhesive meets those requirements? Generally speaking, we use another ASTM test procedure internally called an ASTM D1151. And this is the standard practice for the effective moisture and temperature on adhesive bonds. And it's a kind of a scientific, it's definitely a scientific process. Samples are assembled and aged under various humidity and temperature conditions. And that's going to give us some idea as to whether or not an adhesive can withstand. Now, an adhesive can withstand those kinds of conditions. And that's why we can safely state that products like Eco 399 and Ultramont Eco MS for LVT are suitable for use under the conditions of high moisture that we talked about. We also do some immersion tests, drop them in water, various different levels of pH. We do them on slabs and in the field. Anyway, a lot of testing. Environmental chambers are used for all this stuff. So it's really a scientific method to help us to deal with all that. These are some of the test conditions that we put together and determine whether or not an adhesive degrades, enhances, remains the same during all of that testing process. That's important since we're finishing up, I think, the discussion about the adhesives, that we are clear that there are kind of two categories of high moisture resistant glues. One set of products are just simply moisture resistant in the fact that they offer no moisture vapor barrier to them. So if you are thinking about using any of these adhesives, and I don't think I have the whole list here, that are moisture resistant, to install a moisture sensitive flooring, you're probably going to have a problem. The adhesive is going to stand up just fine, but it's going to allow moisture to transmit through and may have some impact on the flooring that you're installing on top of it. On the other hand, we have a whole bunch of adhesives that are high moisture resistant and high moisture barrier products combined. We mentioned a couple of those already, the Ultramont Eco MS for LVT, or 995 and 985 for wood, MRT for resilient flooring, and SRT again for resilient and sheet and for wood as well. Those are all high moisture resistant and moisture barriers at the same time. Okay, so why does this all matter? Okay, it's important that you understand that some part of this sandwich has now changed, but not all the elements have changed. First of all, we've gone now to high moisture resistant or high moisture resistant and barrier adhesive products, but the toast, the bread that we've been working on, is now a lot soggier than it used to be. So we need to figure out how to address that. So again, as I mentioned before, I'm sorry about the lunch analogies here with this sandwich of the perfect installation where we have peanut butter and jelly. You know, what now becomes the weakest link in this whole assembly? I have a sandwich made out of high moisture resistant adhesive. And now this is an opportunity for all of you to chime in and tell me what the fill in the blank should say on resistant patches and skim coats. What should that number, what should that say? And hopefully you're going to tell me why that should also be a high moisture resistant patch and skim coat. Congratulations, everybody gets a gold star. You're ahead of the game if you understand that. The problem we deal with now is that we've got blinders on. And I think this is something I encourage you, if you're a contractor or even one of a sales rep or involved in a sales organization, we get focused on numbers. I do it myself, everybody does it. We get focused on that adhesive number, it's 99%, I'm using it. And you don't think about the rest of the elements that went in to make that sandwich. You don't think about your prep products. You don't think about anything else involved in it. You just think, I got 99% glue, I'm good to go. So we need to be aware that, you know, we're dealing with traditional subfloor preparation products. A lot of them were designed to work on that golden Labrador concrete slab at 3 pounds and 75%, 3 pounds MVR and 75% RH. And as we moved up the chart to get to that soggy toast analogy, some of these are just not going to work as well as you'd like them. And again, why they're not going to work as well, they may have a very high dispersible or re-emulsifiable dry polymer content to them. If they, I just want to mention how to explain this. If you can take a dry polymer and get it wet and get it installed on a concrete slab in your patch and then let it dry, but bring water back into the equation, that dispersible polymer is going to redissolve again. Sorry. That's not necessarily what you want to get. So you need to be looking for products that are specifically designed to work at a higher moisture level on this concrete slab if you're going to be using these high moisture concrete adhesive systems. So what happens to these traditional prep products under high moisture conditions? They're going to start getting softer. The abrasion resistance decreases, which is really not a huge issue if you're going to cover it over with flooring. But if you're in the process of doing the work and you're dealing with a traditional patch compound on a wet slab like this, it may not be as hard as you want it to, and you'll, as you drag things across it, it will rub off or come off easier. The compression strengths will decrease somewhat. That's not a good thing if you're running heavy rolling loads across the surface. Indentations can happen. In the worst case scenario, the expansion can happen, causing swelling, delamination, and essentially wood floor flooring failures in the process. So now we're getting back to the combating solution. How do we fight high moisture concrete conditions with MAPEI patches? And since we're a Deerfield Beach company and spent some time on this beautiful water fishing as well, I thought the analogy was appropriate. How do we battle high moisture concrete slabs? And with that, we turn to the tools that we have and the products that we have to solve these kind of problems. I'm going to start off first and foremost with a go-to product that we have in our product line. This actually is part of our CRS, the Concrete Restoration Systems business, but we use an awful lot of this in the floor covering industry. MAPEI Quick Patch is a high performance concrete patch. Now, it is a patch, not necessarily a skim coat. So in terms of definition, a patching compound can be used in thick layers. We'll talk about here as well. MAPEI Quick Patch can be installed from a 1/16 of an inch up to 1.5 inches, neat or deeper in small areas. That's kind of what I would consider patching compounds. Anything that be used in a thick layer. Skim coats, on the other hand, are designed to be skimmed over the surface. Typically, those things are not going to be much more than a 1/16 of an inch, and they definitely need to be smooth enough that you can feather them out to zero. So skim coats are definitely thin, and patching compounds are applied a little bit thicker. MAPEI Quick Patch is a sanded product, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get to that thin layer. And it's also sometimes not your last step. Because it is sanded, it does create a little bit of a rough surface. And if you're installing something like a 2mm rubber or sheet vinyl or resilient flooring on top of an application quick patch, you might see the texture of that through the surface. So you might want to skim it with another high moisture product after you install it. But again, Quick Patch is a great product. A lot of great track record, does a lot of deep fills. You can modify the water ratios to make it thinner for wide applications, thicker if you want to build up to make a ramp or transition. So it's got a lot of flexibility. It's designed to be used interior and exterior. So that means you can use this on repairing a concrete step or a concrete deck outside. So it has all those wonderful benefits to it. So that's Quick Patch. More information about that is available on our website for sure. Another product we have in the line that we've had out for a couple years now is Planet Prep MRS, Meet the Misses. MRS is a moisture resistant skim coat. Again, this is like Quick Patch in terms that it's got all this hydraulic cement and it works extraordinarily well on high moisture concrete slabs, but it does not contain any sanded material. So you can apply this in a thinner layer application, smooth across the surface to make a skim coat application over high moisture concrete slabs. Okay, so that is Planet Prep MRS, can be used without having any internal air conditioning controls in place. It is an interior use only product at this point, but it is a great product for fast track leveling and smoothing of interior floors that are high moisture concrete. Again, no moisture limits. I forgot to say this, it's a 25-pound, 100% solution. But it can only be used in an application up to about, I think, a quarter of an inch. We'll talk about that in a minute. A new one we just introduced is Planet Prep PSC, patch and skim coat. So here is now another solution for floor prep on a high moisture condition that is a fast drying product that can be feather edged and goes up to a 1-inch fill of thickness. And we'll put all this stuff on a chart at the end to hopefully make sure you get all that information out. But Planet Prep PSC is a very nice troweling material, high polymer modified, fiber reinforced, resistant to high moisture, fast drying. I think you'll be quite pleased when you look at the drying data that we present on here in a little bit, and definitely for smoothing and repairing interior floors on high moisture concrete slabs for the installation of floor finishes. I'm going to tell you right now a little bit about Planet Prep PSC's future. If you have seen the technical data sheet for PSC today, I'm going to ask you to take a look at it again in about 2 to 3 weeks. We are changing some of the positioning on PSC to be a more aggressive based on further data and research. This one is now going to have the same moisture limits as our MRS product. It will be a 25-pound, 100% solution going forward. So I do need for you to take a look at PSC going forward. One other product we have for high moisture concrete patch and skim coat, which is kind of new to everybody. This one was introduced at the Surfaces Trade Show back in 2018, I think it was, when we had an actual live technical Surfaces Trade Show. Could have been 19, sorry about that. As part of our shower system for LVT. This is a pre-mixed patch and skim coat product, excuse me, more of a skim coat and embossing leveler that doesn't require the mixing of water. It comes ready to use and is also designed for use on high moisture concrete slabs. Dries in about 2 hours, very quick drying, easy to sand, very hard and very resilient, and definitely water resistant. So keep that in mind if you're working on projects that are getting to be a little bit more snarky, is not the right word, but are more concerned about dust and mixing of dust products on job site. Planet Prep for LVT is a material that can be used without mixing, ready to use out of the bucket. Close the lid and you still have material to use. It doesn't have a pot life like some of the other cement-based materials going forward. Okay, so anyway, by the numbers, let's take a look at all these products and how they compare. Again, MAPEI Quick Patch, minimum thickness is a 1/16 of an inch over the highest spot. Max thickness is 3 inches in small areas of 24 square feet. You have to wait for about 16 hours before you can apply high moisture adhesive on top of that. And you cannot use an embossing leveler, but it's a very strong and high compression strength product. Planet Prep MRS is a feather edge to a quarter of an inch. We've got a little bit of a limit on that one. 6-hour dry time for moisture adhesive applications. I think MRS has a limit of 2 hours if you're putting a moisture controlling membrane on top of it, but 6 hours for glues. Can't use that for an embossing leveler and a pretty high compression strength. Planet Prep PSC, the one we just introduced, or what we're talking about today, is 1 inch to feather edge. very fast drying, 30 to 60 minutes. So that's going to be well received by the installer base, the contractor, no longer having to wait for high moisture adhesive applications. You can't use this as an embossing leveler, and it's still got a pretty good compression strength, which is above that 3,000 minimum requirement for ASTM F710. Planet Prep for LVT, as I mentioned before, is a feather edge to a very thin application. It's really a true skim coat and embossing leveler. You're not really going to want to use this in very thick applications, but if you want to skim, that's a great product for it. You can apply adhesives on top of it within 2 hours, and you can use it for an embossing leveler. We don't have compression strength testing on this kind of data, but it really is irrelevant anyway because it's a skim coat, an embossing leveler. Moisture vapor emission rates, as I mentioned before, MAPEI Quick Patch has none because it's an exterior rated product, and it's being exterior rated. All those ASTM F1869 2170 products don't comply. You can't do them outside. So we know that it works in high moisture conditions and freezing conditions and hot conditions and rain conditions and snow conditions, etc. Typically the application range is 45 to 85. You do need some porosity and texture of the concrete. They're recommending anything from a CSP of 1 or 3. And can you use this over wood substrates? The answer is no. Planet Prep MRS, again, you'll see where we are on that one, 25 pounds, 100%. We like some porosity, temperature range 40 to 90. Can't use it over wood because it just doesn't have any polymer, it's very brittle, designed for use specifically over concrete. PSC, on the other hand, enhanced characteristics, 25 pounds, 100%. 50 to 95 is the temperature range. Yes, we'd like to have some porosity when you're installing it on a concrete slab. And yes, you can also use this product over wood substrates, approved wood underlayments like exterior grade plywood, if you could afford to buy it these days. Planet Prep for LVT, a 12 pound, 99% solution, 50 to 90%. Substrate requirements here are none. You can basically use this on non-porous substrates. We recommend it over waterproofing membranes. We recommend this over existing porcelain tile, over a wide variety of substrates that have no porosity. So again, that's kind of why you have to apply it thin, because it does have to evaporate in order to dry, but it can be used over a lot of different substrates, including wood. Word of caution, and I want to make sure we're all kind of clear on this one, where I don't want you to use high moisture resistant virtually anything are areas that are known osmotic blistering problems, and you'll know what these are. Contractor will call you and they'll say, I got water squirting out from underneath my floor. That's really a problem child, and we need to have a conversation with our tech services department. I can help out a little bit with that as well. What's causing this problem? We don't want to deal with osmotic blistering. We don't want to deal with hydrostatic pressure issues where the water is literally oozing up from underneath the floor. Areas with known alkali silica reaction, not a very common problem in the flooring industry, but more in the exterior concrete application, but it's something we need to be aware of. We're not going to be able to install this stuff in standing water. Folks, I know the contractors would love to be able to install flooring when the ceiling is not installed and it's raining outside. Come on, let's use some common sense here. No standing water, that dilutes everything. It gets in the way of the bond strength, and it's not a good situation. And I'm going to caution you to avoid the use of these high moisture resistant skim coats and patches over old adhesive residue of any kind. And the reason why I'm urging this caution is that you're dealing with a very moist environment, and the bond performance, the the sandwich that needs to be made here needs to rely on a great bond between the substrate material, the adhesive material, and the substrate. And if you have some sort of ooey gooey adhesive residue on that concrete slab and you're still trying to make it work, that's going to become your weakest link. It needs to be removed, abraded, ground off to get to a clean concrete if you're dealing with high moisture conditions. Now, having said that, if the concrete slab's got old glue residue on it and it's 3 pounds to 75%, I'm fine with using these products. But it's where we get into high moisture conditions that can create bond break situations that's of concern for me. So that's the summary, and I hope you've been able to get some good jewels of information about MAPEI Quick Patch, Planet Prep MRS, Planet Prep PSC, and Planet Prep 4 LVT. With that, I'm going to get back to my peanut butter and jelly sandwich and pass the baton perhaps off to Jen for some questions that people might have. Jen?
Hey, Jeff. Yeah, there are some questions, so don't get yourself too gummed up with peanut butter there, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so the first question is, Jeff, how is fly ash content influencing F2170 readings?
All right, so what's happening with fly ash is that it's a kind of an environmentally good thing to put fly ash in concrete because it's a great way to get rid of it. It's a byproduct of coal burning power plants, but it is a glass-like material that polishes very tightly, and it really creates a very glass-like surface on the concrete. It fills in the porosity, fills in the microcapillaries of the concrete slab, and essentially locks all the moisture in a concrete slab uh, from breathing. So that's it. Basically, that's what happens. It's a cork in the bottle. It's a stopper in the bottom of the tub. It just fills in those voids and keeps all the moisture in the concrete slab. It's perhaps it does make sense from a concrete construction to use it. Number one, it's a recycled product. Number two, it does keep the moisture in the concrete slab and controls the curling and all that kind of stuff. But it does create a very difficult product to bond to, very glassy, very non-porous, very slick. But that's my understanding how that works. Now you can get away with certain levels of fly ash in a concrete slab. And I want to say we have a technical bulletin online for this, and I thought it was something like 20% addition by weight is the maximum levels we put in for fly ash. It could be numbered, don't quote me on that. I would recommend you run through a search through our technical bulletins on fly ash because we do have some statements in there about that. Okay.
All right. Next question. MS4 LVT, does it require an underslab moisture vapor retarder?
No.
Easily answered.
No. Yeah, ideally, yes. I mean, but you got to make sure the rest of those things are not a problem. Okay. You got to look for osmotic blistering. You got to look for hydrostatic pressure. You got to look for the evidence of pre-existing moisture vapor emission problems. Again, Planet Prep 4 LVT is not a moisture vapor barrier. It is a moisture resistant patch and skim coat. Okay. If you want to have a discussion about how to stop moisture transmission, you came to the wrong presentation. We're talking about products that just withstand high moisture conditions. And all these products that we talked about here withstand high moisture transmission, high moisture conditions, but they do not block them. Just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Good. Okay, got you. Here's a question, and I personally think it's a good one. What does embossing leveling mean?
Okay. In the resilient world that I live in, you used to be able to buy, and you may still be able to buy this sheet vinyl that kind of looked like ceramic tile. In other words, it had grout lines built into it. Even, and in certain respects, if you have an existing tile floor that you want to cover over with some resilient flooring like LVT, you have embossing in it. You have texture in it. Okay. The flooring market, when they made these things, had embossing wheels that would emboss a pattern onto the floor. If you don't fill in that embossing and put another resilient floor on top of it, the flooring on top will take The bottom texture will telegraph through the top. Hope you understand what I'm saying. So if you got a grout line or that's underneath the resilient flooring and you just glue the floor on top of it, you're going to see where that grout line was. An embossing leveler fills all that texture to make it a very smooth surface. So again, keep in mind that resilient flooring conforms. It's resilient. It's soft and rubbery and is going to want to take the shape of what's underneath it. So if you're putting it on an existing flooring, whether it be ceramic tile with grout lines or an existing resilient flooring that has texture on it, you'll need to use this Planet Prep 4 LVT as an embossing leveler to make it all smooth and flat so that when you put the new flooring in, it doesn't take on the texture of the old floor. Does that answer your question, I hope?
I hope so. Good. Okay. Here's a good one. Can you use gypsum patches on high moisture concrete?
Yeah, hopefully everybody in the audience here knows that the answer to this is absolutely not. You really don't want to get gypsum wet because gypsum cures by evaporation, not by hydration. Let's make sure we're clear about that. All the cement-based stuff that we deal with today cures by hydration. It locks water up and becomes a non-water soluble material. Gypsum, on the other hand, dries by evaporation. The water leaves the system, and if it gets wet, it's going to fall apart. It's just like if you have a plaster cast on a broken arm, the doctor tells you don't get it wet. There's a reason. Um, Not to mention the nasty biological stuff that can grow underneath it, but you don't want it to get soft. You're trying to keep it rigid. So the same thing is true for any kind of gypsum patches in the flooring market. They're not designed for use on high moisture conditions at all. So don't use them there, please. That's just waiting for a trouble.
There you go. Okay, so I guess what happens if your substrate is gypcrete then and the moisture levels are high?
Then you need to get a chair, sit back and wait for it to dry. I mean, there's nothing you can do about a gypsum underlayment that's high moisture other than to let it evaporate and dry out. And again, thin application. We have a variety of gypsum levelers in our line, and the recommendation here is if it's a thin coat, it dries pretty quickly. If it's a thick coat, it takes a lot longer to dry. There are specific meters that we use to measure the dryness level of gypsum products, and they need to be like less than 5% remaining humidity in that gypsum. But there's nothing you can do. You need to let that moisture evaporate and get out of the system in order for the product to achieve its full performance. So please just sit back and let it dry.
Makes sense. All right. Ooh, here's a good one. Why don't you guys publish compression strength data for skim coat products like Planaprep SC?
Good question. I get this question asked a lot. What's the compression strength of a skim coat? And I need you all to understand that a compression strength number is really important for things that are thick. The test method itself uses a 2-inch cube in order to run a compression strength. And it's really kind of relative to things that are patches. It's not relative at all for something that I'll use in a 64th of an inch layer or less. So that's why, for the most part, on many of our skim coat products, we're not providing compression strength data because it's not a relative question. Our patching compounds, on the other hand, where you're applying them thicker levels above a quarter of an inch, half an inch, an inch or 2 inches in depth, that does make sense because you're recreating the substrate that you're trying to match a 3000 psi number. But skim coats are, what is that product that women use, a foundation or something just to fill in some sorry
Spackle?
for doing that, but a minor defect, and it's not really structural by any means. Um, caught me on that one, but that's kind of what it is, just to smooth things out. It's not really designed to add any construction strength, so that's why we don't have compression data for skim coats.
Here's one. Can MAPEI be used for a ramp application?
MAPEI Quick Patch can definitely be used for ramping applications, and I think we've got some good instructions on the technical data sheet on how to do that. I think it requires a slurry coat to start with, and then um, a creation of a thicker mass of MAPEI Quick Patch to create the ramp, but absolutely one of the best products in the market for that. Yes, you can.
Awesome. Okay, well, wait just a few more minutes and see if any more questions pop in. Oh, here's one more. Okay, do the high moisture and moisture barrier adhesives of 985, 995, and 4LVT provides the same warranty protection as Planasil moisture membranes like VS, MSP, and PMB?
Yes, to answer your question, they do. The 995, 985, Ultrabond Eco MS for LVT are lifetime performance warranties as a standalone solution for the flooring that they install. Okay. You can get the same thing, yes, using Planasil VS, Planasil PMB, and a urethane adhesive on top of them to install wood flooring. I think, how do I explain that? Planasil VS is the gold standard for moisture vapor emission controls. Needs to be covered with a primer and a leveler for the most part to get that properly installed. MSP, on the other hand, I think is a lower warranty position than VS, PMB, or the standalone moisture barrier bonding solutions on there. It's a good question. If you want to ask it a little bit more detail, we can talk about that offline, but I would certainly look at our best back warranty system again on the website to get a better clarification of how we extend our warranty on those kinds of products. But to confirm, the adhesives like 995, 985, and the Eco MS for LVT are standalone moisture vapor emission rate bonding solutions with a lifetime performance warranty.
Good, thank you. Okay, I'll give people a little bit more time just to finish typing anything. But if there are any other questions that come up once we do conclude, they can always be sent to MAPEI Digital at mapei.com, and we will be sure to forward them on to Jeff, and we'll absolutely get any answers for you. And we also invite you to check out the video library on our website, www.mapei.com, as Jeff mentioned earlier, because there are a bunch of videos. Some of them actually do feature Mr. Johnson himself that explain a lot of information. And we do have some tech bulletins too. Oh, thanks, Jeff. People are thanking you. And I thank you too, Jeff. It was a great presentation. And we thank everybody in the audience because we know how busy your days are. And we really do appreciate that you spent some time with us today. And I guess that will conclude today's presentation. So thank you. And until next time, have a great rest of your day. Bye.